right, thanks, Brian. Thanks. I'm really happy to be here today. It's been a few years since I've spoken at this meeting, and we haven't had a perch report, an oral perch report in a few years. Also, we had a written report back in 2012, but I want to acknowledge that we passed, and last year passed the 20-year anniversary of the Yellow Perch Task Group being formed, and it's been a really great group to work with, great agency collaborators, really, a chance to work with some really top-level scientists, people like Jim Bentz and Mike Jones, and their students, and also a chance to work with the public. And this is I think of people like Eddie Landmichael maybe, and people. We get some. You laugh a little bit, but people are really passionate about perch in the public, and it's been a really fun and interesting and rewarding group to work with. So, Mitch, I'm pointing. Oh, can't figure this out, huh? The other red button, right?
Oh, right.
So today I'm gonna give a presentation similar to what we've done in the past. Go through a series of indicators of the perch populations in Lake Michigan. Talk about recruitment, age structure, recruitment as young a year or age 0 relative abundance, age structure, current populations, and then adult relative abundance. And I'll go through examples from around the lake, and then also where we have them. I'll talk about standardized lake-wide kinds of indicators, or one agency lake-wide indicators. For example, USGS does lake-wide surveys for forage fish that we've heard about, and they also sample perch. I'll talk a little bit about regulations and harvest, and then wrap it up by talking just about some of the activities that are ongoing around the basin relative to perch populations and perch management. So recruitment, we get indicators of age 0 abundance from trawling and seining primarily. They're pretty consistent patterns around the lake. We've seen good year classes recently, or in the not too distant future, or past, in 1998, 2005, and 2010. In the last 2 or 3 years, though, we've been pretty consistently had low levels of young year production around the lake. And again, I'll give you some examples here. This is data from Illinois. The black line shows you their seining effort, but you can see pretty clearly there the 2005 and 2010 production, but again, in the last couple of years, not much going on in Illinois. Again, similar pattern here from Wisconsin, the western side of the lake, 2005, and this is the main basin. Most samples near Milwaukee, but 2005, 2010, pretty apparent there. Again, the last couple of years, pretty low levels. Green Bay, we have samples from Green Bay, and Michigan DNR Marquette Station does sampling along the North Shore and northern Bays de Noc. A little bit more frequent production in these areas, and you can see also this is indicating to you that if you look at the y-axis here, that the levels of production are a lot higher in these shallower bay areas. Again, in the last few years, even in Green Bay here, we've had a pretty good drop off in production young year fish. This is some of our data from Michigan. Similarly, again, 98, 05, and 10, you can see here. And this, our information, I presented data from 2 different ports, and it gives you a little bit of indication of how it's not always easy to get a good sample of these young year perch. So some years, when we considered that we had really good year classes, for example, look at 2005, you can see that in one port we really got a really strong indication of that strong year class. In the other port, South Haven, in this case, we kind of missed them there that year. So it's not as straightforward as a little easier than gobies maybe, but not always easy to get a good sample of production in every year. And then lake-wide, again, we see the same pattern thanks to Bo Bonnell provided their lake-wide trawl series from the USGS, and Chuck Medengian has been a really great collaborator on this also over the years, and they've got a good time series here showing that 05 and 2010 they did not sample or had some sampling issues in 1998, so we don't have a measure from lake-wide from them for that year, but pretty consistent with what we've seen from the agencies. And just a reminder too on indicators of perch production. This was presented in a written report a couple of years ago, but we're trying to standardize using micro mesh gill nets around the lake. And we've the left-hand graph here shows a comparison between the micro mesh and the standard long-term trawl series, and we get really good correlation between the two types of sampling gears, and then comparing micro mesh in Michigan waters versus Wisconsin waters. Pretty good correspondence there. Not complete, but we're pretty good, pretty confident that we can use these micro mesh nets, which are 1/2 inch stretch to 1 inch stretch, small gill nets, fish for short periods of time in the same areas where we've been traditionally trawling or seining. To get a consistent indicator of young year abundance around the lake. Again, looking at areas where there's rocky habitat, as Randy mentioned, we can't always do trawling for young year perch in those rocky habitats either, but we can fish these micro mesh gill nets in all those areas. And then this is from some work that Michigan State, the Quantitative Fisheries Center did. Brian Irwin was a postdoc at the time working on this, and just a reminder that we tend to remember the 1980s production of young perch as almost some people consider that sort of the standard, or the norm. And this was a time series, a standardized time series of recruitment of 2-year-olds put together from a variety of data sources. Brian put it together from a variety of data sources, but looking from the right-hand side, you can see that 98 year class there, the big peak there in the 80s, but you can also see that pretty regularly we have periods where perch production in Lake Michigan falls below the norm. So just a reminder, I was talking to Kurt Newman, I think, before the meeting. It's a good analogy. Almost, I think, the lake levels around the lake here. We see really pretty good periodicity of perch production, and Brian's work pointed that out pretty well. So, talk about some age structures. This is from the most current year information that we have, and this is just to remind me to tell you that this is different agencies are using different aging structures, but again, we've been able to put together pretty good cross-lake comparisons that paint a pretty consistent picture. This up in the left-hand corner, there's a section perch otolith. A lot of agencies in more recent years have gone to looking at spines, which is down in the right-hand corner there. But again, I think we're getting a pretty good picture of age structure. And for 2014, we're seeing some consistent patterns across some of the agencies, and a little bit different picture from some, possibly due to getting down to low levels of adult abundance and low sample sizes. But to start out, again, in southern Lake Michigan, this is data from Illinois DNR. You can see a pretty strong 2010 year class, about 35% of the population that they sampled in their waters. Wisconsin, on the western side there, picked up mostly a 2005 year class, but this is probably one that was most affected by sample size. They only had 40 perch in their adult assessment this past winter, and so the majority of those fish were 2005 year class, but again, low numbers. Green Bay, and this is Michigan DNR data from Bays to Knock, but Green Bay, the southern bay, shows a similar pattern of more younger fish. We're seeing 2010 and younger year classes here. Whereas the data from the eastern shore, Michigan DNR in the main basin, was really predominantly the 2010 year class, similar to Illinois, but even more, the year class is more dominant in our samples. Almost 70% of the fish we collected were from that 2010 year class. So I'll talk about adult abundance now. I want to. We've been in Michigan. We've been looking at kind of what the what's the maximum size that perch can get in the lake, and how real are these reports of 16 and 17-inch perch. So I want to get a show of hands here. Anybody a 16-inch perch? You ever caught a 16-inch perch? Seen a 16-inch perch in your surveys? Robillard, okay. All right, a few. All right, 17s. Okay, so we're these are some samples that we not commonly, but we pick up 14, 15-inch perch in surveys. But you read these magazine reports of regularly catching 16, 17-inch perch, and we're a little skeptical of it, but we've been looking into it a little bit through we actually have a master angler database that it's really interesting. We've been doing some investigation of that. So I'm going to be talking though about the overall adult populations, all sizes, not just these big fish. This is what people are looking for though. So again, this is around the lake, similar kind of data. This is in the early, when I first started with the perch task group, we were worried about abundance of females in the population, and so the black line on these graphs shows you the percent female. At that time, it was very low in a lot of populations. In more recent years, it's been pretty high. Actually, it doesn't seem to be any problem with percentage of female fish in the population. It does seem to be inversely correlated to population abundance. Some of that is probably a sampling effect, but it does seem to be a pretty strong relationship here. And going through these graphs, you can see how the recruitment data shows up in the adult population. So here you see pretty clearly the 98, a little increase there from the 98 year class, and then another increase from the 2005 and 2010 year classes going through the adult population. Data from the western side, Wisconsin, similarly 2005 year class there. 2010 didn't show up quite as well there. Again, Wisconsin's probably had the lowest catches of any of the agencies sampling in recent years here. So a similar pattern with percent female fish very high in the samples that they are getting now. A good number of females. Green Bay, again, we see, the adult population is probably on the younger side compared to the other parts of the lake, and more abundant adult fish than in other parts of the lake as well. But similar patterns for, I haven't presented data from northern bays to Knock here, but similar pattern there. And this is the eastern part of the lake. Again, we see a peak relating to the 98 year classes, and this is the vertical bars now. The 98 year class is showing up. That second peak there is a 2005 year class, showing up around 2008, 9, and 10, and then not as strong a response from the 2010 year class, which is somewhat surprising. That's probably the biggest amount of young year production that we saw, but didn't really translate into strong levels of adult production in the lake. This is a standardized, we do, again, a little bit of different assessments of adult populations around the lake, from different gill net strategies to some trawling in southern Green Bay, but this is a standardized 2, 2.5, and 3-inch graded mesh gill nets. So we pulled out the data and standardized it around the lake, pretty clearly showing declining levels and lower levels of adult populations in recent years, and also showing the differences in habitat and production around the lake. So Illinois over time has had much higher levels of adult abundance, whereas in Beta Knock, the open triangles at the bottom there, it has been a lot lower levels of production consistently over time. But in general, around the lake, the last few years we've had low production and low levels of adult perch. Just a little bit about regulations and harvest. We had one significant regulation change around the lake this past year. Illinois has gone to a May to June closure on a 15 fish bag limit. They previously had a July closure. Rest of the jurisdictions primarily have retained their same regulations. And this is showing the harvest numbers then, and Brian Breiter puts together an extraction report which has the same information in it, but pretty low levels. The black line is the commercial harvest, the dotted line there is recreational harvest of yellow perch, and low levels from the 80s and early 90s. And again, we had a little bit of a peak there from 98 and 2005, but lower levels in recent years. And then just to wrap up some activities that have related to yellow perch around the basin, we did, and this again, we haven't had a oral report at one of these meetings in 3 or 4 years, so this is going back, I've gone back to 2010 or so here, but we were involved with the production of a chapter describing perch populations in the State of the Lake report in 2011. I talked about how great the Yellow Perch Task Group was, and our 20-year anniversary. We actually were disbanded in 2013, so but we've not completely disbanded, but we were wrapped into the structure. The tech committee now has working groups that are more closely tied to the actual fish community objectives. So the Perch Task Group was formed by the Lake Committee to address specific narrow objectives of getting our lake-wide assessments in order. And developing population models. Now the work that we're doing is going to be wrapped into the inshore fish working group, and we're hopefully be addressing some other nearshore species. It might be some of the goby work that Randy talked about. We've been doing looking at smallmouth bass populations as part of that group around the lake as well. So we're not going to stop doing perch work, but we're going to have a little bit different working structure. Really interesting meeting in spring of 2014. There was a yellow perch, and periodically over the years we've had these summits, but this was really a really nice one in Chicago in March. We met together and presented information on some of the kind of information I presented here, creel data from around the lake, different research projects that are going on. We've had Fred Binkowski talked about perch aquaculture. And had a pretty good contingent of public participation at that meeting. So that was pretty important happening in the last few years here. The Perch Task Group has spawned quite a bit of research, and it's still ongoing. I've included in our written report a page of kind of the most relevant research that's gone on relative to yellow perch in the last few years here. But really, lots of people are still doing some great work on trying to investigate Great Lakes perch populations and figure out what makes them work here. Following up from that Perch Summit, Wisconsin's actually had some public perch meetings and is looking at developing or working to develop improved nearshore perch fisheries in some of their harbors and drowned river mouth areas. And then I put a question mark here because we haven't had a report every year, but we did produce another report this past year covering perch assessment activities and research for the last couple of years to get us up to date following that 2012 report. And just finish by acknowledging the task group again, especially guys like Brian. Dan Mikalskis is a co-author on the written report. He's really been involved almost since the beginning and really done a lot of great work. And also, I guess, acknowledge Dan's dad is going to get honored here in this summer for his work also. So we got a great father-son team there. But again, just a great group to work with. I'm happy to answer questions now.
We have time for a couple.